Hi everybody, I'm Erin and I'm coming to you from Nova Scotia, Canada on a snowy vacation day. I'm going to be talking to you about some of my knitting. This is the first time that I'm podcasting, so I really anticipate having a lot of ums and pauses, and I really have no idea how to do any editing, so not quite sure how this will all go off. And I don't know, they're just gonna start right in. So I have 2 finished objects for the new year, which is not bad since this is the second week of January, second or third week. My first finished object I did cast on before Christmas. I cast it on December 20th to make a pair of socks for my nephew, and I obviously did not finish them in time for Christmas. He did get the bulk of his present, which was money, which I'm sure he's probably much happier with than knitted socks from his aunt. He's 18, so 18-year-olds probably aren't that interested or keen about knitted socks from their old aunties. Anyways, this project was torturous, basically. These are them. They're huge. He's a guy with big feet, so they're a lot bigger than socks that I usually make, as I'm mostly just knitting socks for myself or for other women who have thinner feet that aren't as thick or big. So this was a little bit, I don't know, I just did not enjoy it. They turned out pretty good. The color is really nice, the yarn is really nice. It's Croy, it's, I cannot remember what the color is, but it's Croy sock yarn, and the heels, toes, and cuffs are also Croy. And I learned from this project that I absolutely detest knitting with black yarn, because I couldn't pick up any stitches or correct any mistakes at night when I was knitting on the black portions, because I couldn't see a darn thing. Like, I could not see any of the stitches. But other than them being so torturous to knit because they were so big and the black, they did turn out pretty nice, and I think he will be pretty happy with them. He's a pretty easygoing guy, so I know he'll just probably let on that he likes them anyways. The second finished object that I have for this year, for this podcast, is also a project that gave me a great amount of torture. I did not really particularly enjoy knitting these either. That's like not a really good start to a podcast, is it? 2 finished objects and I didn't enjoy either of them. So I'm not usually like that, but it's just the way it goes sometimes. Okay, so this are my second finished objects. A pair of mittens, and they did turn out pretty nice. I think I'm just so used to knitting with fingering weight for such a long time that when I switch to a heavier weight yarn, it's kind of an adjustment. Your hands miss that typical movement, rotation, smooth gliding. You're just not used to it, but they did turn out pretty nice. So these were made by special request for my cousin's husband. He had a pair of mittens that his grandmother had made for him, and he did get full use out of them. So she had asked me if I could have repaired them for him, but I'm really not one of those knitters who does any repairs at all. I'll just knit you something new. So they asked that they be made pretty much the exact same as his grandmother had made for him. I believe his grandmother has since passed, so he really has a hard time, or doesn't want to really let go of them, and I can totally understand that. I have stuff that my own grandmother knit for me that also is in need of repair and is in the bottom of a drawer and will not go in the trash or be tossed away because they came from my grandmother. So anyways, it was kind of learning experience for me to like make these, because I was trying to like adapt Briggs and Little pattern, Briggs and Little mittens pattern, a paid for pattern, to turn out like this pattern. I have no idea what pattern she used. And I actually did end up, I think she had just tied the top, like weaved the yarn through and pulled it tight. And I have done that with all my other mitts, but for this time around I decided to graft the thumb and the top of the mitten. So like it didn't turn out very attractively. So that's probably another reason why I didn't really enjoy it. But I can tell you one thing that I did love about this is the Briggs and Little yarn, which is also the yarn that I use for. I use Briggs and Little pattern, and I use the Briggs and Little yarn. I use the Tuffy, and I love this yarn. And the main reason that I love this yarn is because of the smell. It just smells so good. It's the first yarn that I ever really started knitting with, and it just always makes me feel so good to smell it. So I did really enjoy that part of the project, and I have so many little balls and leftovers from all the different socks that I did make with the Tuffy, Briggs and Little Tuffy. I think this is called Smoke, this color. I can't find the tag, so obviously I'm not really good at keeping tags around. So I think I might take all those little balls and make some socks, or maybe, since I'm in the learning experience mood, take what I've learned from making that pair of mittens and make my kids a couple pair of mittens. So they have some mittens that they keep in their they have their mittens, their regular mittens that they use for school, but when those get wet and when they're at school, they oftentimes need an extra pair. So I think I might make some for them to keep in their backpacks as backups. So I probably didn't properly introduce myself at the beginning of the podcast, but I do have two little boys. I'm a missus and a mama. So I'm a mom of two little boys, and they are 3 and 2, so they're really busy, and that's pretty much how I've gotten into this obsession about knitting. So when I was younger, I was introduced to knitting by my aunt on my mother's side, and my grandmother on my father's side, so my father's mother. And they showed me, and it's kind of a skill that I always just maintained, like I didn't lose my knowledge of it. And then after I got married, or right before I got married, I kind of took an interest in it again, kind of settling into the home life and trying to find a hobby to make things for the home. So I got back into it and just always had something on the needles, but not really knitting steady all the time. I mean, I could have a project on the needles for 6 months and it would just stay that way. So not multiple projects, just maybe like a dishcloth that took me 6 months to make, but I still considered myself a knitter. And then when I was expecting my first son, I did get more interested in it, of course, because I wanted to knit stuff for him. So that interest increased at that point. And then the following winter, when we had our second son, I just knew that it was winter time. I'm home with a 1.5-year-old, a new baby. I'm probably going to go crazy, even though it's a fabulous time and it's like an amazing part of your life. It's important to keep part of yourself and what you're interested in, because you can get so absorbed and consumed with doing stuff for the kids and for everybody else. So at that time, I was introduced to the world of podcasting from a friend that I had met online who started her own podcast. And I actually at that point had no idea what a podcast was. So in the middle of the night while nursing my son, I would watch the podcasts. So I would take my phone and turn on her podcast and watch it, and then I got opened up to a whole new world of knitting. So at that time, up until that point, I was like at home surfing through the internet, maybe finding something that I might be interested in. Didn't really even know about Ravelry, just thought it was a place to get free patterns. And then when I got into the podcast world or onto IG, onto Instagram, this whole new world opened up for me about knitting, and it became an obsession. So I met so many people, so many great people that introduced me to new yarns, indie dyers. I didn't even know what that was. I think up at that point I really had a very limited knowledge of knitting. I really didn't know the difference between different yarns, materials. I really was pretty green. So since February of 2016, I've developed a complete obsession with knitting. Even when my son was really young and just a baby, if I got up with him to nurse him in the middle of the night, I would come back to bed and knit. And then get up at 5 o'clock in the morning with our 1.5-year-old. So 2 years later almost, I'm getting up at 4:55 every morning, weekday morning, to have about an hour or half an hour to myself where I just sit and knit and drink coffee. Before the whole day starts and everybody needs something from me, I just take that like half an hour. It's so worth it. It just sets me up for the day, and if I don't have that time, I just feel lost. So going a day without knitting is basically unheard of. If that happens for me, something is wrong. Something's bothering me. So it's a huge part of my life, and I really enjoy it. It's brought me so many opportunities. It's brought me so many friends. It really is a whole community, and you can feel part of a community without having to leave your home. You can be very involved without having to leave your home, and I think as a young family, that's super important to keep connected. So that's how this started, and that's why I'm sitting here today talking to you. I don't think this podcast will probably bring anything new or spectacular to any of the other podcasts. I've watched a ton of podcasts. I used to watch some faithfully, and some I've not watched anymore. So I think everybody's podcasting is great, and it's something that somebody's going to show an interest in. So I'm just going to throw it out there, and if nothing else, it'll be like a journal of me and my knitting. So here I am. I have another finished object of sorts. It's a bit older, but it needs to be revisited. So I knit sweaters, and a sweater and a vest for both my boys back in the fall, and I worked really hard, and it was a great project, but the vest turned out great, and I used Madeline Tosh for that vest, and then I used Patton's Canadiana for the sweater, because here where I live in rural Nova Scotia, my local yarn shop is basically a kind of a general store. It's like a utility store, it's a catch-all store, I don't really even know the right word. They do have yarns, and the main local yarn that they have there is, as I mentioned, the Briggs & Little, which is awesome. But they have a lot of acrylic yarns, which is great. I love knitting with acrylic as well, but I think after knitting the vest, it had a bit more of it's all natural fiber, so it had a lot more give and could be manipulated a bit better when it was blocked. And this is 100% acrylic, so it has a bit more of a tightening up to it. I don't know a huge amount about different fabrics and fibers, but anyways, the sweater is too short lengthwise. I did do a gauge swatch, yay me, for it, and I knit it to spec as per the pattern, but it was a bit too short for my son. As you can see, I don't even know what you're seeing there, but and it wouldn't block any longer. So what I have to do is do a bit of a modification to that. So it is a top down. So I have found a tutorial with help from a friend online how to cut into this and put it back on the needles and add more length to it and then put the ribbing back on. So this right now is all that I have left of the yarn. Probably will have to get a bit more. I probably won't find the exact dye lot at this point. I mean, I might be able to, you never know, but if I can just add a bit more to it, I think it'll be good. Like the other sweater that I just showed you against this one is probably a bit longer than it should be on him. Like it doesn't need a lot more. It's just when he has it on, you can kind of tell that it's just a little short. So, and he does love it. He's 3 and he loves it. Mommy, you make that sweater for me? It's pretty cute. So that's kind of a in between a finished object and a whip. So that's my next project to tackle after finishing the mittens. So I got to get those mittens and socks on their way to their new homes. I do have a couple other whips on the go. Once Christmas came, I kind of did a 12 days of Knitmas, which was just basically every day focusing something on knitting, which was so easy to do between Christmas and New Year's. But then once I got back to work, obviously time and not spending as much of it knitting got a little bit less. But during Christmas to New Year's, I did cast on a lot of new projects, and during that time period I did a inventory of my stash where I realized I have a lot of stash. And a lot of times when I see new patterns and things online or in books or that people are showing off their projects on Instagram, I want to do them, but I can't because I just don't have the funds for new projects. So I am in a time period in my life where I am transitioning from working full-time to working part-time. So I'm going to be home an extra 2 days a week with my sons and then work 3 days a week. So that's awesome because it's going to be more time at home with my boys while they're small, but it's also going to be 40% less income. So if I didn't really have a lot of money before for knitting, I really don't have a lot of money for knitting now. I have a knit jar where I'm putting a little bit of money aside every now and then, but I am also putting in that jar little notes of paper of like things that I want to do or want to purchase or anything knitting related that I need to put money towards. I write it on a little piece of paper and I also stick it in that jar because when the time comes, I can haul it out and say, well, that's not really something I'm interested in doing anymore. So I think I'll use this money for a different project. So knowing that that was coming up, that I'm going to have even less money for knitting, I decided that 2018 will be the year where I make a serious effort to knit with what I have. So I did that inventory and I was really surprised, which I don't know why I was surprised because I was spending a lot of money on my knitting. But I seriously was surprised. I found a lot of things that I had forgotten about, and I'm really looking forward to making a serious conscious effort to knit down the stash and make things and make useful things and knit things for people, and just to use that knitting resources that I have wisely. So it was like it's pretty sad to think, oh no, I can't just buy that yarn that I see on there and get it because it's so nice and I love it and I won't be able to live without it. That's a sad thought. But when, just to put it into perspective for myself, I looked at all the skeins of yarn that I have that are just fingering. So I'm primarily a sock knitter. Totally enjoy that. Always have a sock on the go, except for right now, but that will be remedied today. But I am primarily a sock knitter, and I do just tend to pick up that one skein of fingering weight yarn any kind of trip or store or any online shopping, because I know that one purchase like that is gonna come out with a pair of socks. So when I looked at all the skeins of fingering weight yarn that I do have, I think the tally was 36 skeins of fingering weight yarn, and that feels like a lot to me. I know probably some people out there watching that are like, that's nothing, but I was pretty not expecting that number. So if I think about that in terms of my output, I probably make about a pair of socks a month. I mean, it probably takes me about a week to a half to knit a pair of socks, but with other projects and things on the go, I probably on average am making like a pair a month. So if I'm knitting a pair a month and there's 36 in my stash, I could technically knit for 3 years. Just socks. So that really put things into perspective for me, and that's just the fingering weight. So I think this 2018 goal of knitting down the stash and making things from my stash is going to be totally doable, and I'm really excited about it. Of course, it's only the second week of January. This could be a totally different attitude come June. I might be like, screw that. Doorbell. Okay, doorbell. As I mentioned before, we had a snowstorm last night. I don't even think it was much of a snowstorm, but they call it a snowstorm. So we have like 2 feet of snow outside in the driveway. Not too much really to speak of, but my dad just stopped over to snow blow our driveway, so he just needed me to move the car. Anyways, that was a whole side note, and my lampshade's crooked. Driving me bananas. So, stash busting during Christmas and the 12 days of Knitmas really led me to go through my stash and cast on things that I was neglecting. So they are current whips with other knitting goals in mind that I want to do as well. So these ones, no particular hurry to get them done. They're just kind of easy peasy things I have on the needles to pick up and knit with in the middle of other knitting goals. So the first one that I can show you, my lamp's twisted again. The first one I want to show you is one that I was knitting on this morning. So it's kind of funny, this project. I cast it on last year. I bought it last year, I cast it on last year, and it completely baffled me. Like, I could not make any headway with it at all. It was so frustrating. And in the middle of trying to sort out the pattern and being frustrated with the instructions, I had it on wooden interchangeable needles, and my son stepped on the needle and snapped it like a toothpick. So that one got stuffed in the back of the closet while I waited for new needles to put it on. And I was in no hurry to cast it back on or to deal with it, because I don't know what it is sometimes about certain patterns or certain projects that you tackle, but you have to be in the right frame of mind, because for some reason I thought this was the most complicated pattern that I had ever come across, and I could not understand why I could not get it. But when I hauled it back out over Christmas with the new initiative, the new excitement of just knitting through the stash, I was like, I'm gonna do this. It's the easiest pattern. Like, it's so not complicated. So I don't know what was so complicated about last February, but I'm making pretty good headway on it now, and I'm loving it, and I want to knit on it all the time, and I want to just see the finished result. It's really straightforward, it's great. So without further ado, it is the Gradient Wrap, and the pattern is by Todwick Studios, and the yarn is by Handmaiden Fleece Artist. I think it's by Fleece Artist. Sorry, I'm probably shaking that camera. The yarn is by Fleece Artist, and it's a BFL Sport, and the pattern and the yarn came in a kit. So this is the yarn, and this is the first part that I've knitted with. So you can see it's down, and this is the second ball that I'm knitting with. So it's absolutely gorgeous. The pattern is so easy peasy, and I just want to knit with it all the time. And I apologize, you're probably hearing some rumbling in the background. That is my father snow blowing the air. That's what you call bad timing. This is what I've done so far. So you can see that it's basically wraps and turns, and it's decreasing and increasing on this side. So it's a really easy peasy knit. Knit, 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 wraps and turns. Awesome. Hope that doesn't give away too much of the pattern. For some reason the wraps and turns absolutely baffled me, but now I'm onto it and all is good and we're making progress. So the next stash busting item that I cast on was a project that I was kind of saving, waiting to do. I feel like sometimes I save some of my things because they're so near and dear to my heart. Like, I don't want to use the good ones because we just got to keep the good ones and knit through the other stuff, but keep the good ones. So new thing with the stash busting is it's all good. You're not getting any more, so use it. So this is one that I was holding on to, but now I've cast it on, and it's an awesome pattern. It's not too crazy, it's not too challenging, but it has lots of interest to keep you going. It's kind of in between a TV knit and something else. So I bought this pattern and this yarn online from my friend Angela, who has her own yarn shop, Everybody's Dream, in Wales. Her yarn shop is called Yarn and Yarns, and they are on Instagram and Facebook, and I believe they're working on a website, so they ship worldwide, so pop over there. She's got an awesome sale going on in January. Amazing sale. What a time to start my yarn diet. So I purchased this from her. They also have an Instagram, Yarn and Yarns Instagram. So it's Serdar. Did I say that right? Serdar? So the sweater and vest that I knit for both my boys was also Serdar pattern. So it's this one right up here is the one that I'm knitting, and I'm also using the Serdar color wheel. It's a DK weight yarn, and I did use that particular color wheel. I did use this particular color wheel that I did also purchase from her shop to make the Playing with Fire, Boom Playing with Fire shawl for my son's daycare teacher who retired. She was also a good friend of ours, so when she retired I made that for her, and it's on my Instagram feed as well as my Ravelry feed. So on Instagram, my Ravelry feed is Dufferin24. Dufferin24, Dufferin24. And on Ravelry it's also Dufferin24. I have a private account and I switched between Dufferin_24 and Dufferin24, so I think my public knitting account is Dufferin24. Anyway, so the Boom Playing with Fire I did make out of this color wheel, and I didn't want to give it away. It was so nice. Anyways, right now I'm working on this one, which is called the Castellated Wrap, and this is the progress that I have made on it so far. Excuse the yarn in front, and my little moose stitch marker. So it grows as you go, and this is the color wheel. Isn't it gorgeous? Oh, I love it. So I can't wait to finish that and get it knitted up and put it on. I have so many shawls and scarves and things on the go that I think winter might be over before I get them all done and on. Fortunately, I live in Canada, so winter does seem to last until sometimes June, so we have time. The other item that I cast on during my 12 days of Knitmas is also a yarn that I was saving because it was my good yarn. I wanted to make sure that I cast it on for the perfect project. So I think that I did find the perfect project, and I'm loving this yarn. Like, it might be my favorite color combination that I've ever made. Not a particularly spectacular knitter, and I'm actually really terrible at coordinating colors. But this time I think I did pretty good. So as I mentioned, my friend Angela has been really good to me, and when we first met we were joined up in a swap, just a mini skein swap. That's when I first cast on my Cozy Memories blanket. I participated in the Herbstblatt Regina mini skein swap, and it was my first swap, and I got paired up with Angela, who is Rainbow Ange on Instagram and on Ravelry. And the rainbow is a 0 for the W. Rainbow 0. Rainbow Ange. And because it was my first swap, she decided to absolutely spoil me, and spoil me she did. And one of the skeins of yarn that she gave me is in this particular shawl, and I just love it. So let's grab it. I grabbed the wrong one. It is by Mothie and the Squid, and I can't remember the colorway. I probably should have had all this stuff prepared. I really didn't even think I was going to talk that much, but it's called Speckled Rainbow. It's a 75-25 merino nylon blend. It's the 4-ply sock. So it's so gorgeous. Love it. So it took me forever to wind that up. It was in a skein for almost 2 years before I felt brave enough to tackle it. I just almost didn't want to ruin the perfectness of it, of putting it in a wrong project. So not this summer, but the summer before, I did purchase a complementing yarn to go with it for whatever project I did decide. I knew it was probably going to be a shawl. I did not want to make a pair of socks out of it because I just wanted something more lasting, as we all know socks can wear. So I wanted something to show it off. So I knew it was going to be a shawl, and I knew I was probably going to have to add more to it to get a big enough shawl. So I purchased from one of my local yarn shops. So I had to drive about 2.5 hours to this local yarn shop, which is called Badek Yarn. So Badek. It's in Cape Breton, which is just about, like I said, 2 hours away from here. So this is by Richard DeVries, and I'm probably not saying that right, but it's called Singing is the colorway, and it's also so gorgeous. I love blues. Blues are like my favorite, and the yarn is like gorgeous. Anyway, so I put these two together. It's actually, I think, the only time that I've coordinated 2 skeins of yarn nicely. And back in the fall, I was fortunate enough to win a free pattern during a giveaway from the 4 Boys and an NL Girl podcast, which is Patty, and I watch her faithfully. She is one of the podcasts that I do enjoy watching. She has a quick one that she pops out every now and then, which I totally enjoy. Fast, quick little podcasts. It's just like almost watching Coronation Street. You get like your half an hour a day and you're good to go till the next day. So I'm kind of starting to yell because I can see snow like flying by my window. My dad's out there pushing it. Anyway, so I won a free pattern from one of her giveaways, and it was from Critium Handmade. It's the, I'm probably totally not pronouncing it right correctly, Trisha Shawl, Tricha. So that is what I am making, and I haven't made a whole lot of progress. I haven't had a lot of time to put into knitting it, but it's a super enjoyable knit, easy peasy knit. It's the first time I am doing an I-cord edging, so at first I was like totally baffled. Once again, something new, totally baffled. Anyways, the edging on it is friggin' gorgeous! So this is it. So it is an angular shawl, and sorry, I feel like you're not going to be able to hear me because of this snowblower. I'm telling you, if it wasn't for bad timing or bad luck, story of my life. Now I think he's actually stopped right by the window. Just stopped there with the machine running. I'm just going to pause this while I wait for him to move along, and maybe I'll use this opportunity to fix my lampshade again. I swear, it's taken me about a year to actually get up the nerve to get up the lady balls to actually do this, sit in front of the camera and talk about knitting, and this is the day that my father decides to bring the noisiest machine outside my window and make a whole bunch of noise. Anyways, I'm in it, I'm doing it, we're getting this out there. So this is a great pattern. Like I said, it's easy peasy with just enough challenge to keep you interested. So that's the Trisha. Oh, I'm terrible. Anyways, so love it. My little stitch marker, got a 4-pack of stitch markers from, I can't even remember now the name of her shop, because Adelaide Cottage, her podcast. So I bought that from her Etsy store a couple of years ago. So that is another WIP, another work in progress that I absolutely love, and it is being stored in a quite comical little bag. I hope nobody has feelings or anything, because they might get a little hurt by this, but this was a Christmas gift from my friend Angela. Love it! And my final WIP right now is from, well, the yarn is from the, I can't even think with that noise. Okay, so this is the other side of my room, and that's basically where he's standing and throwing rocks and snow out and around. Back in November, I joined in on the Have Your Yarn Wishes Granted, and I was really fortunate and totally spoiled. Like, again, I don't know. Who are these people and why are they so nice to complete strangers? They're knitters. Totally spoiled by my friend Trisha, who is on Instagram as TLC Stitches. I wanted to get my hands on some Lolo Did It yarn because obviously everybody wants to. It's gorgeous, like her colorways are amazing with the most awesome colorway names. I just wanted some minis or a full skein or something, and she sent me a full skein, which I don't have right now because I'm saving it for the good knit. Gotta save all these yarns for the good knit. Anyway, she sent me a ton of little minis from all the projects that she made with Lolo Did It. So my Christmas Day cast on, like, I knew right away that's what it was going to be. As soon as she gave it to me, I was casting on a shawl with those minis, and it's called the Mini Skein Madness shawl, and I had made one for my mother, and I used all leftovers from little minis that I had gotten and put into my cozy memories blanket. You still end up with a tiny little bit left over, and it just does not seem right to throw those out, so I had them all stashed in a bag somewhere. So I used those, picked out some nice ones and used those to make my mother a Mini Skein Madness shawl, which takes about 120 grams of just whatever you have. It's a stash buster. So I loved it. The one that I made for my mom also did not want to give it away. So that's when you know it's a really good project and the people really deserve it, and you're so excited to give it to them because you don't want to give it away, like you want it for yourself. Anyways, so I knew I was going to make one of those for myself. So I'm using all the low tidits from Minus Game Madness. So it's a series of just garter stitch and then a series of eyelet. So easy peasy, but enough to keep you interested. So as you can tell, that's kind of the knitter that I am. Nothing too strenuous, but nothing too boring. I'm a very middle of the road knitter right now. So that's about it for me for today, except for one thing about podcasting, you learn about where all your flaws are. Today I am going to cake up some cozy knitter to cast on a pair of socks for myself. So I'll be off to do that today. I'm going to be using You're So Foxy, which is in a ball. I used part of this yarn to make a hat for my friend's newborn. So I did two hats, two newborn hats, one in kind of boy colorways and one in girl colorways. And I can't remember the name of the other cozy knitter colorway that I used. It's all self-striping yarn. But I made one of each for her so she could take each one to the hospital for whatever her baby turned out to be, and she turned out to be a little girl. So I did have this all balled up. I have no idea why it's in a ball. I don't know why I didn't cake it. Probably just wanted to give myself a hard time that day. So I have that all ready to go, and I'm going to make a pair of socks, and I'll probably put that in a cake. It came with it. It's for the heels, toes, and cuffs. So that should make me a pair of socks, because I always like to have a pair of socks on the go. When you do your 5 a.m. knitting, it's nice to have a pair of socks on the go. It's nice to have something that you don't have to haul out and wonder where you're at. You just sit there and sip your coffee, and so that's pretty sweet. So that's it for me for today. I don't even know if this will be a regular thing. I might not even post this. I hope that I do, because I just sat here for all this time yakking by myself at a camera. I don't know if anybody will join in and watch, but give it a hook, and if it goes nowhere, it goes nowhere, and if it does, it does. Just open to whatever. It's how you get in the knitting community. You be open-minded to whatever. So hope everybody has a nice day, and I hope sparks come off your needles. See ya.